Hey, this is Chris with Phoenix Gaming. Today we're going to wrap up our series on enforcers and we're going to do a deep dive into the support units. We're going to look at support options for enforcers and how they look, and we're going to talk about each unit individually and maybe a little bit on how they can get used. A lot of the support stuff's fairly straightforward, so it won't need as much of a dive as some of the, say, specialist units. And then we're going to go through them in the same order as the list builder. And then at the end, as usual, I'll rank them on how I feel they would rank best to worst. And again, just remember that this is subjective, so your experience could be different based on the way you build your lists and the way you play. But before we dig in, let's go ahead and if you are wanting to support the channel, go ahead and there's some Amazon affiliate links in the description for the two-player starter set, Enforcers versus Marauders, as well as Command Dice, a couple other things. If you buy using those links, there's no additional cost to you, and I just get a small kickback on it. And then, as usual, like and subscribe if you appreciate the content. Thank you. Let's dig in. We're going to start first. Like I said, we're going in order. Strider. It's advanced training, which almost everything in the Enforcers army has it. I'm real hard pressed to think of anything that doesn't. It doesn't mean that there isn't anything there. It's just off the top of my head, I can't think of anything. It does have heavy armor and controlled fire. The base loadout is really good for anti-infantry. You get 6 shots with pinning at 24 inches range. You can upgrade it to a tank buster for plus 25 points, and that brings some nice anti-tank firepower to the table with 2 shots that are anti-tank, and they're Dev D2 plus 1, sorry. And all that means is that they're going to do 2 or 3 damage if they go through. The Urban Assault is a solid side grade. It's 0 points, and it gives you a Chainsaw, which is 4 attacks at AP3 with Frenzy 1. Remember, Frenzy lets you reroll a hit roll on the charge, or in melee, so it's just weight of fire for melee instead of shooting. And really, the only thing with the Urban Assault side grade is I feel like the Chainsaw maybe needs anti-tank, and not even that it needs it. It's just when I look at that model and how big that chainsaw is, and I'm just like, hey, maybe it should do something to heavy armor, even seismic. I don't know. And again, it could be just like my looking at the model thinking this should have this and it doesn't. Because I come from, like I said, 40k. So like dreadnoughts, when they fight, they crumple armor. So in my head, that's what I see this as. AP3 without anti-vehicle, right? Or seismic, without something to counter heavy armor, it just feels kind of weird. And again, even if it got a points increase to get it, that would be fine. I'm just saying it just seems weird. It seems weird, especially when you look at the energy gauntlets. They're AP2 with seismic. You know, so again, it just feels weird. Not that it's good or bad. It just seems a little odd to me. The heavy flamer is a pretty solid option because it's got 4 dice, it burns, and it does have controlled fire. So you're going to be able to shoot at things when they charge into you. You can't modify the it burns roll, so you're getting 4 dice that are going to hit on 4s, which is pretty good. You can upgrade it to marksman for 10 additional points. It's worth it for the tank buster for sure, and probably for the base loadout. The base loadout is what? I think it's 6 shots with AP1 pinning and 24-inch range. Marksman lets you reroll ones. Actually, it makes you reroll ones. There's an important but subtle difference there. Makes you reroll ones, and man, especially for the tank buster, that is worth it because the efficiency hit you get on that is incredible. Because you're going to get 2 shots hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s, which means you're only going to miss on 2s and 3s. And on a D8, that's pretty spicy. That's only like a 25% miss rate. And then, if you get it in the Peacekeeper Captain Aura, you're going to give it weight of fire 1, which also means you get to re-roll 1 additional die. Right? So, like, I can re-roll 1s, but if I get 2 2s for my misses, I can re-roll 1 of those 2s to try to pick it up. So on average, you're going to hit both times. They are AP4. That aura would give them vicious. So again, you're going to consistently average getting one of them through with that order. You'll probably still consistently average getting one of them through without the order, but with the order, it drastically increases the likelihood of getting both of them through. Ready for anything is another good order because you can slap it on it, it can move up, it can shoot, or it can charge or whatever, but then it can just go into Overwatch, so if something countercharges, you get to shoot your flamer at it. So again, ready for anything is another good order there. The FO order can be useful for the base loadouts, the tank busters or the base one with the laser. But the downside to that is that you can't move when you use it, and I just feel like enforcers are an army that almost always have to move. You have these smaller units. You don't want to be stuck out in the open. You want to keep moving. And so anything that forces you to sit still, unless it's a dedicated shooting platform, which I guess this would be, you don't necessarily want it sitting still unless it's on an objective. So overall, like I said, I like the Strider. I think they're pretty solid. We'll see where they rank. Then we have the Accuser Interceptor. Now, this data sheet or unit card, whatever you want to call it, is kind of weird because it has a bunch of different loadouts, and each one has a different name, and then each one has different upgrades. So it's almost like 3 different units in one, but because of the way the game is set up, they wanted to keep it into one. And what I mean by that is like if you look at 40K, you have the rule of 3, right? You can only take 3 instances of a data sheet. And if something's got a lot of options and you don't want to just see that get spammed, you just kind of make each loadout a different option on one data sheet rather than each one getting its own data sheet. So that's why I think all of these different loadout options aren't their own unit. They are spread out, or they're condensed into one unit with a bunch of different options. The base loadout, it's got anti-tank, it's got a transport capacity of 5, obviously fly and vehicle, and then if you take the sensors, it gets to redeploy D2 plus 1. So you can redeploy 2 or 3 units, and man, that's an awesome ability, and I haven't really seen a ton of that in this game, but that sensor alone is probably worth taking this jet for. The default loadout is excellent into infantry. It's 8 dice, AP1, and pinning. Missile pods are 10 points, but they add 1 shot with blast and AP1. And I think I touch on this a little bit later. I don't know that that's worth 10 points. The Arbiter loadout replaces the laser with Polaris cannons. It is 20 extra points, but you get 4 shots anti-tank Dev 2. It's basically like 2 Striders condensed into 1 jet. And it's excellent anti-tank shooting, right? Like it's 24 inches, so that kind of is meh. But it's really, really good. Like 2 damage, 4 dice, really solid. The Adjudicator loadout adds fusion, and that gives you 4 shots at AP2 with blast D2, which is going to be probably better into more elite infantry, like more like nightmares or more enforcers and things like that. But honestly, it does have a points increase, and I forgot to put that on here. But for the points, I'd probably just take the pinning laser cannon. Like, you could spike, right? Because you're getting 4 shots. I mean, you're still only getting 8 hits at max because of blast. So it's one of those, like, I could maybe get 8 hits or 8 shots, right? But I could also just consistently roll 8 dice. Sure, it's AP1 instead of AP2, but it also pins. So like I said, I think for the points, I like the laser better. Any loadout can take the sensor array for 20 points. It does have a few like restrictions, right? Like if you take the sensor array, I think you can't take the missile pods. I'd have to double check that. But like I said, to me the sensor array is 100% worth it. It gives you tactician and adds a black die, and then also the redeploy. And the redeploy alone, in my opinion, is probably worth 20 points. That can be, in the right hands, an incredibly powerful ability. Any loadout outside of the base takes away transport capacity, and that's important to note. So if you go with the Adjudicator or the Arbiter, your transport capacity becomes 0 instead of 5. So if you were looking to make it a transport, that's something to keep in mind. Any orders that benefit the Strider are going to be good for this, so I'm not going to necessarily dig too deep into orders with this. And we're not going to get too crazy with the orders in the supports anyway, just because there's so much overlap. Like, well, the orders that work for this will work for that. And there's not necessarily a need to go through the different orders with the support the way we did with troops and specialists. The Persecutor Bomber is the other jet. It is anti-tank or advanced training, targeting systems vehicle. Targeting system's pretty handy because you're gonna have two different guns on a base loadout. One's good into infantry, one's good into tanks, and it lets you separate them. It's hander, not handier, not even handy. It's hander. God damn. Sorry. Sometimes, man. I didn't take my meds today, so my focus isn't the best. So sometimes, like, I have more typos and stuff like that. The default loadout gives really solid anti-tank and anti-infantry. The bunker busters are 2 shots with AP5 and Dev 2 and anti-tank. And then the anti-personnel are 4 dice at AP1 pinning and blast D2. They're relatively short range at 18 inches. And then for 10 points, you add a missile pod, and the missile pod's just the same as the missile pod in the other jet. And again, if you've got the 10 points and you're just like, I don't know what to do with it, sure, you add it. But I don't know that that's something you plan on taking. I think that's something you take if you're just like, oh, I have 10 points to waste. Then we have the sniper platform. It's 120 points, and it's obviously advanced training, anti-grav, slow, reload. And that's a weird rule. Basically, if you take a regular shoot action to shoot, you get a -1 penalty. But if you take a long action to shoot, and I could be misspeaking on this, so correct me in the comments if I'm wrong. But my understanding is if you take a regular shoot action, you incur an additional -1 penalty that stacks with all your other -1 penalties. But if you don't, and you take the long action to shoot, the steady aim, it just negates that. I could be wrong, but basically it's to penalize you for moving and shooting. Instead of just like, oh, you moved, you cannot shoot, it's, oh, you moved, you get an additional -1 to hit. So it is a construct, and, construct means no pinning. And that's there because of me. I'm a goose. I've had constructs and forgot that they don't pin. The Polaris Railgun's pretty beefy. It's 2 dice, AP5, anti-tank, Dev D2 +1, and Marksman. So it's 2 dice that are going to hit on 4s, re-rolling 1s. It doesn't have the vehicle keyword, so there's going to be a few more orders that it'll stack with. 48-inch range is, I think, the longest range in the Army. I could be wrong on that. But all in all, it's a pretty solid, pretty meaty platform for just, like, threatening shooting lanes and tanks. Ajax Striders. First of all, I love this little handsome bastard. They're so cool looking. That was actually what made me want to do Striders in the first place. When I first bought the Striders, I didn't realize this was like a special upgrade kit. It's armor 8 with heavy armor, and it's probably the most durable unit in the Army, or at least really close to it. It does have the shield, so that gives it the armor 8 and defensible. So that means you can effectively controlled fire all the time. But it's not going to be super great for controlled fire, and we'll talk about why in a minute. It's 2 shots with the spear are AP2 and blast D4 at a 12-inch range. So, controlled fire, you're going to hit on 5s on average just because of the -1 for controlled fire, which means you're going to average 1 hit, which means you're going to average 2 hits because of blast D4, right? 2 to 3. And I look at the chassis, and it looks just a little underwhelming. But I also have to remember that this is arguably not supposed to be an offensive unit, but more of a just like the Peacekeeper Defenders, where you put them on an objective and try to like hide them from bigger shooting and allow their heavier armor and stuff to kind of shrug off the weaker weapons out there. But overall, I don't know. The melee's kind of weird. It's 6 attacks at AP2, but there's, like we've talked about it, there's not really a ton in the Enforcers army that like buffs melee. And it just feels weird. Again, this is another one where like I feel like maybe it should have seismic because I look at that spear and I'm like, why is that not also just a melee weapon? Right? Like Homeboy looks like he could shank some dudes with it. Why is this only shooting? And again, it could just be again coming from other games to this. Looking at this, my expectations aren't realistic. That's entirely possible, and I try to be the first one to admit that. But I look at its offensive profiles and I'm just like, I haven't put it on the table yet. I'd have to put it on the table to see how I feel about it. But it is armor 8 with heavy armor, and there's not a lot of heavy armor in the Enforcer's army. The Striders might be the only heavy armor units now that I'm thinking about it. So it's one of those things to keep in mind is that this is going to give you a durability that this army kind of lacks. Like, the infantry are very durable for infantry, but they don't have anything that's kind of like the Wolverine tank where it's like, I am just durable all the time. So that's one of those like kind of weird spots for the army, and the Striders kind of fill that. And I like Striders in general. I think they're very good. But again, it just one of those things where I'm just like, this Ajax Strider specifically is weird. I need to get a couple more Strider chassis because I have a couple of the upgrade kits, and I'd like to build them out. They're super cool looking models. And then, lastly, we have Novashock Peacekeepers. 150 points for a unit of 2 of these. Man, these are expensive. They are, obviously advanced training, resilient, controlled fire. They are armor 8 with resilient 1, and that's nice with 3 hit points. They could be kind of rugged. They're not going to be terrible on the table. Their base loadout is heavy fusion. It's 3 shots at AP2 with blast D2. And that's going to be a solid, versatile weapon for dealing with shields or infantry, light vehicles, stuff like that. But for 10 extra points, you get the heavy thermal rifle. It's 2 shots at AP4 Dev 2. And that's a pretty meaty anti-tank gun. Again, the issue that the Peacekeepers have is, 1, they're slow. They move 5 inches. And 2, their range is fairly short. So they are going to need like a forward observer order, arguably, just to kind of like keep them from falling behind and like getting pulled out of range consistently where you need them to be. They look on paper pretty good. Like I said, they're one of those units where it's like, okay, if you tech into what they do, you could make them probably feel pretty good. You can take up to 4 models, and then extra bodies are 10 points cheaper, and you can mix and match loadouts. So you could take like 2 thermals and 2 of the other ones, the fusions. Sorry, words. Words are tough. And that's kind of all of them in a nutshell. We're gonna go from best to worst as usual, and I will try to list why I have things where I have. And again, just a reminder, like, this is based off my experience with the game and how I play. I tend to play a more melee centric, more aggressive play style, whereas like maybe you play a more static, sitting and shooting play style, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It just means that what you like in the army might be a little bit different than what I like in the army. So. Up top, I have the base Strider, and again, I just think they're so good. You can give it marksman. So if you take the burst laser, it's 6 shots, hitting on 4s, re-rolling 1s. It's armor 7 with heavy armor. Like I said, off the top of my head, I think Striders are the only heavy armor in the army. I could be wrong on that one, but man, I struggle to think of any. It will shrug off a lot of volume fire. And again, like I go back to the Michigan GT when I played against Mason Labs, and that guy just like dumped a ton of shooting into me. It just didn't do any damage. I did hide it from his anti-tank weapons, but it was just one of those like, I'm gonna roll a bunch of dice at you and nothing's gonna happen. So that does help my kind of like opinion on it, is knowing that it's actually pretty resilient. Don't get me wrong, you get enough volume, you're going to chip through that heavy armor, but it does help. The Tank Buster loadout, so it's got options. You can make it very good at anti-infantry. You can make it very good at anti-tank. It does have options. It's very good at killing vehicles with the Tank Buster loadout. Whoa. And honestly, the worst loadout is still a good take, and that's the chainsaw with the flamer. And when I say worst, I mean like for what it offers, I just don't know that it's worth taking when compared to like the burst laser. And that's just because of like it has controlled fire. Well, the burst laser's got a longer range. It can give a pin token, so depending on what's charging you, that could be super important. Obviously the flamer can also be really good with its activation, like manipulation. But the more limited range, like it doesn't have anything to buff its chainsaw. It just goes in and slaps, and that's about it. It can benefit from orders that make its shooting extremely efficient. So, like I said, like especially the Peacekeeper Captain aura, giving the Tank Buster weight of fire 1 and marksman, and vicious, like you're getting damage through. It doesn't matter. And I have not played a game with my enforcers in which I haven't taken at least one Strider. Like I just feel like the Polaris cannon is that good, and that platform is that good. Like, I could do potentially 6 damage to you with one shooting, right? Like just shooting once. I think in second we have the interceptor, and honestly, the big reason is the sensor array. And B, just the variety of loadouts. So you have a chassis that can do a lot of different things depending on how you build it. So that's why I put it here. But like I said, I just think that it is that good. The redeploy is that good that it is worth taking this for that exclusively. If you set it up right, you could be really aggressive with a couple of units to try to like get your opponent to deploy somewhere, and then just like, I'm going to move these 2 units back, or I'm going to move them over here, stuff like that. So, uh, it's one of those, like I said, like I haven't put it on the table yet because I'm just not a fan of the jets in this game. But in the context of what you have for support options for enforcers, I do think it's that good. You know, I think the sniper platform's number 3. It could arguably be number 2, depending on how you're using it and how your list is built. But like I said, the 48-inch range, you can lock down some massive shooting lanes. If your opponent has jets, you can just like pick that up. So it's pretty good. It's not really durable, but that's one of the things I take issue with a lot of the enforcer support stuff. And really, a lot of enforcers non-infantry units is that they don't have the durability that the infantry does. Almost all of the vehicle chassis are just like armor 6. So they're literally the same armor as a regular enforcer, and it just kind of feels weird. Peacekeepers are more durable, arguably, than like a jet. Sure, the jet has more hit points, but at armor 7 and resilient 1, the math is not that dissimilar to get like 2 or 3 damage onto a peacekeeper as it is to get like 6 damage on a regular jet with a no AP gun. Like, yes, the math does still favor killing the enforcer or peacekeeper, but it's not as big of a difference as you think. So it's just one of those like kind of weird situations. And I think the rest of them are just kind of fluid between 4 and 6. And a lot of that just stems from the fact that, man, they require some sort of list tailoring to get them to actually work. I think the Novashock Peacekeepers look good, but I think their low speed, short range keep them from really being higher on the list. But if you build into them with like a sensor array and redeploy, you could put them someplace, excuse me, and attempt to use your redeploy to kind of reposition them into a more advantageous spot. So they do have play. I just think it does help to build into them a bit more. Whereas 1, 2, and 3, those are items or those are units you could just drop into almost any list and they just function. Armor 8 helps them out a ton, so they're going to be pretty durable. They are resilient 1. Like I said, and they're so damn expensive. 75, 85 for the thermal, and then you get a 10-point deduction for each additional one. So you're looking at 150 base, And if you're going to take 2 of each gun, that's how you do it. Is your first 2 just get the fusion, and then your second 2 get the thermal, and then you're spending 300 points for 4 models rather than like 320 or 330 or whatever it would come out to be. Um, the Persecutor Bomber, I think it just suffers from the same issues that the Nova Shock Peacekeepers do, and that's that it's got a low range, 18 inches. It makes logical sense, right? Like, I get why the bombs are 18 inches. But with Armor 6, no real defensive buffs available to it. I just don't know that it's worth putting on the table, because if your opponent has any kind of reliable anti-tank, that's going to get picked up almost immediately, and for good reason. And that's one of those, like, the Interceptor isn't a whole lot more points, and it just brings more to the table. The Ajax Strider, like I said, it's rugged, it's durable, it's defensible, it has a lot of positives. And I think it'll tank a lot more damage than it really should because of the heavy armor and everything. But man, is it extremely short range. And AP2 in both shooting and melee, it's gonna get outshined by cheaper units that just do the same thing. The regular Strider has better range and is effectively the same points. And you can just either tech into infantry or anti-tank. It's not as durable, but if you're getting hit with AP3, AP4 anti-tank weapons, I don't know that 12.5% difference in your durability going from armor 7 to armor 8 is all that big of a deal. The defensible might be worth just as like a charge deterrent, but again, it's still only 2 shots, so it's not like it's amazing. It's not like it's crazy good. It's just a spear. Overall, I just think it's a unit that really could do with some sort of buff. Um, I don't think I don't think it's terrible for its points, and I don't think it needs to stay the same points if you make it better. I'm just saying, like, it needs something to kind of just like make it stand out. Armor 8 heavy armor is pretty good, don't get me wrong, but I could just take other armor 8 bodies that are like more versatile, that do a bit more. So, like I said, it's just one of those weird things. I think these 3 units kind of are like, it's not that they're bad. They just need a bit more list tailoring, and you can't just kind of plug them into a list and have them perform. And they still have rules, and they are still pretty solid. Keep in mind that all the vehicles can't control objectives, so you can't even just put the Ajax Strider, on an objective and just be like, this is mine. Now, for missions like Control, where you just need it in a table section, then, yeah, you arguably could. And you could attack. You could use it as like, I'm going to just go send it into this unit and try to get a bunch of damage on it. It's going to be really good at light vehicle hunting, but you already have things that do that. So again, it's just like, I don't know. I think we're all on the same page here. Maybe if you've got something that I've missed with the Ajax Strider, again, let me know in the comments. But that's going to wrap it up. Thanks for watching. Next week we get back to Veerman. I do apologize for the lateness and the little bit of rush that this video had. We just have had a lot going on this week. I've had a lot of school stuff, and I've had a lot of GW work that I've had to grind out and get shipped out, and it's just shift my schedule kind of crazy. So again, apologize that this seems a little rushed and is a little late, but I wanted to make sure we wrapped up the Enforcers before we kept digging into the Veerman. Once again, I appreciate all of you. I hope you all have a great day, and we'll see you next time.